To the Life Burst podcast, a podcast where we talk about a bunch of Weedcross stuff, and today we're going to continue on with our updates of Changing Diva. This time we're updating the Musica deck to the Changing Diva format. So with Musica and Diagram as a whole, right, you have this flexibility that you always have. That has not changed. You can still change this in a lot of different directions as you will. As always, you know, Musica excels at bouncing the assist signies to her hand, and then being able to replay them and getting extra value that way. Because of that, you have a lot of different ways that you can design Musica. As we discussed in the last video, you should check it out if you guys want more history on Musica. You need to sort of put your own direction into a deck like this because it's inherently a good stuff deck. Again, we're still playing with the fact that the opposing Signy in the center lane is going to get negative 2,000 power, so you're going to want to rearrange it occasionally in order to maximize that type of stuff. And you're going to be adding a Signy from your trash to your hand when it enters. That's usually a guard, but sometimes it's a lane clearer. But I will say this, what I have wanted out of Musica has homogenized a little bit over the time. And the reason being is that because Muzica has come out and is so strong in terms of hand disruption, and being more of a blue focused Elrig, Musica has turned into more of like, well, I don't want to step on Muzica's toes. Like, you can do what Muzica does with Musica because it's basically the same team, but you might as well let Muzica do the Muzica things better and let Musica be stronger at what Musica is strong at. And what Musica is strong at, its strengths are basically removal. I do kind of fully believe that this is just the better version of Sandbaka. And Musica can still do what it did before and very well, which is be the strongest black center you can choose. It has a lot of abilities to basically lane clear and attack in. It doesn't do it so well early game, and that's one of the things that black struggles with, but you don't necessarily need to do it early game when you have a readily available Lancer with Senga Aerial. But I will say that this deck does the mid-range thing that you're looking for, which is just try to gain maximum value every turn. When we were playing this, we discovered that realistically, that's the goal of the deck, right? It's just to play the cards that have the most impact and value and try to get as much value out of them every turn. And as long as you're playing that, even though I know this is a little bit of an advanced deck, you should be able to get what you need out of it. Now, it is a little focused in the Changing Diva format to be more focused on being a mill deck, specifically milling your opponents out, which existed in the original version of it with Salvage the Future, but with a new card that's been introduced. And this is really the only Changing Diva card you're adding to the pair, which is Polaris Code Ancients. You're going to be... The one thing that you got to recognize is that with this Harmony ability does not make it so that way you can play two of these in one turn. You can only play one of these in one turn. But you have the upside of also being able to play Langling here. So you're basically milling your opponent out pretty reliably. With 3 of these guys and 2 Langlings, you are very likely to be able to mill them out a second time if the game goes even slightly long, right? I'm talking about turn 5 long, so not very long. And inevitably, that is what this deck aims to do. You got to recognize that crushing a life cloth without triggering life bursts is very, very powerful. In fact, I was reading a designer article on this specific card, and they more or less said that. They were like, yeah, we tried Harmony with just like 1 Elrig, but we realized that you needed to make it 2 Elrigs because being able to refresh on command is incredibly strong in Wixoss, and it is. And so doing it twice is even better. So there hasn't been really any changes to the Elrig deck format. You're still using Senga Aerial as your primary mode of early damage, Senga Strike in order to negate some damage a little later down the line. You're still using Muzica Clap in order to negate damage down the line, but this one's very flexible in its ability to negate it. You could use the other, I think it's Muzica Dub is the other one. It's a little cheaper and a little better against control decks, but inevitably I think I tend to this because I'm a kind of designer who would rather design for the meta as a whole and take my lumps when I go up against a certain type of, control meta or something. And I would just rather be more versatile about everything that's around me. I travel to a lot of stores too, so that's one of the reasons why. But yeah, you have options again to meta as you need to. A Muzica Float being one of the best draw engines that you could possibly have, being able to double it. Your choices are either doubling this or doubling Aerial. I think you're going to use Aerial about 70% of the time, and 30% of the time you're going to be doing Muzica Float when you go up against longer game matchups. Your early game is going to be these multicolors per the usual. And then I've added a bit more of the Garesh Lightly Armed. Garesh Lightly Armed has been more useful than it was in 0-1. Signies are starting to trend to lower costs, and this then is going to make it able to kill things more reliably. I prefer to kill things straight out, but these negative abilities also can be helpful when you need just a little bit more, and then you sacrifice this afterwards just to get over a hump. So maybe you're using Langling here, and you get negative 5,000, but you need to hit that 7,000 mark. Cool, you just drop in the Fraudulent, and you just finish out that Signy's power with that. Plus, it can help you get a win with Senga Aerial, being that you're giving Lancer to something. So it's got its uses. It's not as amazing as Rommel is, but it's pretty good. Of course, you're still using Ball to mill yourself a little bit, and then you go into your level 2s. Your level 2s is where basically all of your life bursts exists, right? Like, that's predominantly their use. We're using mostly Kayasumi here rather than the other options, because when you play this, not only is it a big wall, it also has and it carries Lancer well, it also has the ability to rearrange the positions of Signies on your opponent's fields, with the fact that you're giving the center Signy negative 2,000 as a constant with your Elrig. This is it's just good. It's just a good thing to do. And then you have a Folklore as the last one. And this is just a pretty good ability. You could replace this with things that down and freeze if you wanted to be more surgical about what you were kind of walling out. But this saves you against No Limit, and I think that's its true power. More and more and more, it's like, as No Limit decks have getting more and more refined, they wipe out your entire field. So getting hit with this as Life Burst number 1, and then shutting down the rest of their attacks for the turn is great. So as the meta progresses, as lane opening becomes easier, this card becomes better. And then inevitably you go into the realm of, all right, I'm just going to lane clear with my late game stuff, and that's going to be your Langling, your Dark Energy, and your Osaka Getsune. You'll notice that I have 2 Everdating Melodies and 2 Ana. As we go forward with the meta, you actually are going to find that we are going to be using less and less Enervating Melodies, because an Ana should just really be thought of as a spell in this deck. I know it's a level 3, but really it's not a level 3 because it needs other Signy on the board. So if you're drawing late game and you're running out of Signy, this is a spell that's stranded in your hand. It's really a spell that requires a Signy. And yes, it upgrades your Signy to then bash very hard, which is great. But it is a Signy that has a requirement, or it's a spell that has a requirement of seeing a Signy on the field, in my opinion. And it's good. It does lane clearing just like you want it to. And then we talked about how Langling plus Polaris will inevitably allow you to mill your opponent out probably a second time around. There's 1 copy of Trouble in here. Theoretically, you could pop that to 2 copies and probably lower 1 copy of Evading Melody if you wanted to. Trouble, its job is as a 1-of or a 2-of is to help you win against late game decks, and that's it. So if you're up against a no limit deck, you probably enter this pretty quickly. If you're up against a Uchu deck or another Diagram deck, you might want to hold on to this even though it's not good in the early game, because it will win you the late game, and that's really what you're trying to do. That is the deck in a nutshell, and the upgrades that we've done. Of course, there's always other options to go for. I've actually got quite a bit of other options that you can look into. As far as pieces go, Azure Black Gaia is always an okay option here. That is something that you can use if you just feel like, all right, you know what? Instead of Chime, which is going to fix my early game hand, I'd rather have a late game draw engine and disrupt my opponent a bit. It's a fairly good choice, and I think that if I was to choose between Chime or that, I'd say it's a 50-50 case scenario as to which I'd rather use. You might want to run into Xenocluster if your meta is a little bit more discard heavy, aka it's running Madokas or a lot of no limits that are running a lot of discard, and you just want to stay in the game. The Enterburn thing is not really super relevant, but it's okay. You could always run Atalantas if you want to have a little bit more access to easy game lane clearing. I don't think you really need it in this, but you could. If you need more access to Enter Charge in order to make your Osaka Getsune hit more reliably, other than the combo with Dark Energy, of course you could run Musuzaiku. And you could run that in order to get a little bit more energy enhancement. I don't think it's that great. If I was going to do a weird level 2, that's not one of the ones I already ran, I probably would run Amazonius. I think it's a pretty good green level 2 in the fact that it can vanish most things pretty easily for free with its life burst. Plus, it's pretty big on its own too, so if you were looking to be more wallish, that's an option for you. But if I really wanted to be wallish, the card that I'd be running was He Natural Element. This card I've seen rocket in usage in the Japanese meta, so it might not be its time to shine right now, but it might become its time to shine later down the line. The less and less card jockeys in the meta, the more and more this card becomes good, by the way. So think about that as well. Some other level 3s that you might be able to use is a Amino Acid Natural Bacteria Queen. This is a really good tech against Madokas or against other Musica decks, as it just doesn't die to black-based removal all that easily. Plus it makes your stuff buffer, so you just basically will win the late game with this, and your Signy will probably stick around to just punch harder. The last 2 are things that I don't actually think you should use all that much, but are options. You got Graham High Armed. I don't love Graham. I think it's bad Lancelot, but it does the job. As if you're looking to fill out your 2 slots, you could do worse than Graham. Graham will do the job that you're looking for, even if it does it begrudgingly not super great. And then, of course, there is Haiji Kata, Azure General. Haijikata is good. It's better if you can enable it from the Elrig deck, which you can do with Chime of the Blessed Key, but you're not doing it as easily as Madoka can, because Madoka then has other things that enable it, especially in blue. So I don't think it's a great option here. I think you should stick to what the basics are, and the basics are remove things from the path and punch the person in the face. I wanted to add one other deck that I found online that was pretty good. This is by, if you go to Fire Pit TCGs, he does Hellfire does a blog where he talks about a bunch of different cards and decks that are coming out. It's a very cool thing, and it gets kind of a slice of life look at a sample size in California of what the meta is looking like over there. And one Musica popped out to me as being kind of a cool hybrid between Musica and Toko. It's using the normal Musica stuff that you would use for all of these Elrig decks. But it also is using a sort of self-mill engine here, and using the virtual cards as another way to do sort of gaining an advantage with self-mill. It's running, I think, 14 to 16-ish virtuals, which is probably the bare the bare minimum number that you can put in to make a small package of. I don't think you can make a, virtual deck out of it or anything. But it's basically replaced some of the card removal options, the ones that give negative power, with virtual Signy. And also, like Melissa, who's just a powerhouse on its own. This is just a good life burst, point blank. And then the Reina package, which is, utterly fantastic. It's free removal. I would say this is pretty risky, though, because you really need about 28 cards to make something consistent, like a tribal package. And this uses 16, so it's really doing a bare minimum for it. But it is pretty cool and pretty an option to use, I think. This is from the old meta, by the way, so not changing Diva. But I don't think you actually need to add very much to make it usable in the changing Diva meta. Again, because that virtual package is sort of complete on its own. That's how I would go about it. So this is my Musica update for this changing Diva format. It's still a very valid deck. It's still definitely probably a tier 1.5 deck. And you can still rock with it. So absolutely take it for a spin at your local. Let me know how you guys do with it. Let me know if you guys have any other ideas. I'm sure there's a bunch of you guys who have tried different things. This deck is very varied in its approach of what it can do. So I hope you guys do the best you can with it, and may you always flip a life burst.